what you are watching each week is not the real thing. This is the real thing, and we're going to tell you how it all comes about and the real personal goings on. And it's kind of a confusing process, Matt. And I think it's not helped because WWE internally make it this complicated spaghetti kind of cocktail, if you will. That a viewer, if you're coming into it fresh, you're kind of thinking, well, what really am I supposed to be getting engaged in? And it's hard because you can't get fully committed behind too much because you don't believe it for 1 second because with all the social media and everything else going out there and the way the presentation is, it's just tough to get into. But going back to Broken Matt, give him credit, he is not breaking that character for nobody. And I think it's part of his success, if I'm being totally honest. I think by keeping to that level of commitment, it's definitely getting its rewards, because literally he's not breaking character. Ironically, that is called Broken Matt, but he is definitely not breaking it. In that sense. And I wonder, Matt, if WWE themselves, I have heard, Triple H make passing comments that he's a little bit of a fan of it. And I wonder, Matt, in the future going forward, whether that is something WWE would consider down the line again.
Well, it would be interesting, wouldn't it? I mean, straight away, I'm sure lots of people have thought in their minds who ideal opponents for Matt would be. It's all the fun of his making these fantasy matchups. But still, I think he's approaching the twilight of his career now. He hasn't got too many years left in him.
No.
I can see his in-ring work is looking a lot more harder for him to pull off now. So I think if they were going to do anything, they should really put a move on it. I mean, I know they've had a habit of picking people up in their 50s lately, but
well, yeah. I mean, the better. Yeah, I think age is not an issue anymore with WWE. So I don't think he's probably set himself up for 10 years later if he wants, the way things are going currently. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, I kind of wish, Matt, in a sense that Bray Wyatt was where Matt Hardy is currently now. And people were talking about Bray like this, but it's unfortunate because they don't do a very good job at protecting him, and I don't think it's through effort on his part. I just think the WWE system doesn't really help because sometimes you'll see them having to kind of go along to do kind of signings or charity kind of events, and it's unfortunate. I don't think all the characters should all be wrapped up into one thing. I think the bizarre, the kind of really theatrical kind of characters like a Bray Wyatt really need to be kind of wrapped up in cotton wool and protected somewhat for it to really work. But of course, with his career and even now, in fact, it's not really ever got the. It's just never got over that sort of first hurdle of kind of being a sustainable threat to anybody currently. I mean, I know this is another stage what we're seeing in his evolution, and people might think, well, this is a success of tag team, but in my eyes it's not quite a success considering he's had matches with John Cena and The Undertaker at WrestleManias in the past. Really you'd think that would be it, but it's one of those things. I definitely think WWE need to go back to a drawing board and think more hard about how they go forward with their wrestlers. But that's for another topic. But TNA in general, like I say, I hope that things pan out for them. We know in the UK at least that we're not going to be getting any. They've been thrown off Challenge TV. So unless they have somebody picking that up, and we are one of their biggest audiences, from what I understand, that's going to be a bit of a heavy blow as well, isn't it, Matt? I mean, they do really well when they tour in this country, but not having it for us to see is going to be it's going to be another blow, isn't it, for them? I'm not saying they couldn't get people to turn up for tickets, because I think they would, but you know, people want to see it easy access, and Challenge probably was that, but not having that channel deal, Matt, is would probably cause some problems.
Yeah, I can straight away see that. I mean, I know I criticise it sometimes, but like I said before, there's always been good qualities about TNA, and the fact that it is so easy for us to access over here, and it is kind of, if you have Challenge is free on most channels, and it's available on most packages. So if you just have it, you can watch it for free essentially. So of course it's going to get a good audience in the UK. I mean, for that reason, it's my second choice of wrestling promotion.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I like Ring of Honor, but the ease of access of getting to TNA has always made it my second choice go-to, like behind WWE.
Sure. Okay, guys. Well, before we move on, gives me a chance to tell you what's going to come up, because obviously we've been talking about the familiar topics, but I'm really pleased to say that we're going to have Daniel Puder. The only, I'm going to say he'll probably be the only one now as well, the only $1 million Tough Enough winner. And you know, you can go back, by the way, on our first interview we've done with Daniel, where we spoke to him about the $1 million Tough Enough contest, and you'll find out that it wasn't quite $1 million after all that, and find out what the ins and outs were. And you can literally hit the subscribe button on the Wrestling Skull podcast if you already haven't, and you can go back and listen to that. But Daniel has been on our show many a times, but he's going to be on the show tonight. He's going to join us, and we're going to be talking about the upcoming UFC 207 card, which of course, you know, I've got to say it, Matt, I've got to say it how it is. We are a wrestling podcast, but the announcements that Goldberg and Rousey were coming back were pretty much, I think, were around the same sort of week. I'm led to believe I can remember that happening, and we got more emails about Ronda Rousey than we did Goldberg, and we're a wrestling podcast, so that goes to show you her popularity. So I know that people have been asking, can we talk about it a bit more? Can we talk about UFC and all the rest of it? So I thought, seeing as we're going to have our first ever live preview for UFC 207, we'd get Daniel on to talk about that. But not only will we talk to him about that, but we're also going to go into a little bit of detail about the goings on, Matt. I'm sure you've heard about this, of Conor McGregor getting his boxing license, and the possibilities of crossing over into the boxing world, because obviously we've seen, you know, boxers come into wrestling and MMA come into wrestling, but we've not seen quite MMA go into boxing just yet. And I think there's more of a feud going on there than there is between wrestling and any of these other sports, and that's probably where the real thing goes in. Matt, let me ask you first and foremost, will you be watching 207 itself and Ronda Rousey and that return fight?
Been waiting for the return of Rousey for a long time now. I think a lot of people have. So yeah, it's going to be a good one. Actually, I've got a good feeling about that fight. I mean, just the fact that people have been saying that Rousey's the underdog, you know, that to me is incredible, because the stuff that she has done, you know, in that octagon is like unmatched. So, you know, it's crazy to think that she can be booked that way. So I can't wait to see her come back and sort of like take off where she left before, you know, and carry on and just like break even more records. Sure,
yeah. I mean, it's going to have. I mean, Dana White himself believed it was going to have. He felt it was going to outdo anything that's been done already this year, which is really saying something. But whether it does or it doesn't, it's going to be big. I mean, people are going to be interested. It's amazing the timing of it all, Matt. I mean, normally UFC does. I can't remember UFC doing pay-per-view events on a Friday night first and foremost, but that's probably due to the fact the next day is New Year's Eve. But I mean, just the anticipation for it, the fact that it's in kind of a holiday season, I'm guessing that's how he's gauging the audience. And of course, you know, she's popular on many levels. I mean, I suppose if you think about it, Matt, he might be right in terms of, if you think about how many of our wrestling listeners currently are interested in this, perhaps there is that massive crossover that there isn't with perhaps somebody like a Conor McGregor, that there's more of a, there's that sort of crossover from wrestling fans. There's maybe, I mean, she obviously is a huge mark for many of the female sport fans out there as well, because she's kind of the pioneer for all this kind of stuff. So very, very interesting to see what happens. And like I said, folks, we're going to have Daniel Puder joining us on the podcast a little bit later on, and really looking forward to asking him what he thinks about the return of Ronda Rousey. Don't forget, folks, if you want to get in contact with us this evening or any time for questions or anything that's on your mind, you can get in touch with us at the Wrestling Skull Podcast at gmail.com. We always get quite a lot of emails in, but what I'm going to try and do, because I've seen we've had a lot of emails in the last couple of weeks, so I'm going to try and cover as much as we can just through myself and Matt talking backwards and forwards, because if we go through all these questions, we could be here until the morning, Matt. So I'm sure at some point we'll probably end up needing some kind of rest. So there's no way we can go on that long. And for many of the listeners, their ears would probably be blown up by the time we got to the end of this mailing list. But Matt, in between the couple of weeks, we've had TLC. I only have seen bits and pieces of it. I've got to be honest with you. I've just not had much time in seeing this. This is the only one this year that I've not sat down and properly watched. So I'm going to ask you, Matt, what you actually thought of the show in general, and overall, was it better than the 2 SmackDown brand only pay-per-views that we had before Survivor Series?
I'd say it's on a par with them. I mean, the matches, I think they were overall very good. I did like the Miz versus Dolph Ziggler's ladder match. It was a long match, but I think they both carried that off very well. I was going into it a little bit dubious, another Dolph Ziggler and Miz match. What can they possibly do? But hopefully that's going to be the end of their feud now. I think it was a fitting end, really, because they did put off more of a classic kind of feel to a ladder match. And of course the main event was going to be AJ and Dean, and they were going to have to top the Miz's one and Dolph Ziggler's one. And I think they only just about managed that, only because of some quite spectacular stunts that AJ was pulling off, doing 450 splashes from inside the ring to the outside the ring through a table. Only spots like that put it ahead of what the Miz and Dolph Ziggler were doing. But it was kind of like a night of old feuds, getting rehashed and just drug up, and I didn't know why they were just sort of doing them again, a bit like they did with Baron Corbin and Kalisto. Another kind of match where I was going into it thinking, do I really want to see this? But I was actually quite impressed by the sort of work that both men put in, and how comfortable Baron Corbin looks now on a pay-per-view, and the fact that of course he got the win again, which doesn't really do Kalisto any good. But I'm glad that they're sticking to their guns and sort of pushing Baron Corbin up through the ranks a bit now.
Yeah, well, we've been waiting for that since the brand split, I think, because he got as far as I can remember, he got a really high draft pick, didn't he? And
yeah.
And I was thinking, wow, this guy he's gonna be getting the push, but didn't really happen. So yeah, that's going to be really, really interesting to see. Maybe is this his launching? I mean, I don't know if it's the best launch I've seen, but certainly better late than never, I guess. So yeah, I'm kind of pleased. I mean, I'm going to say this much, Matt, that I kind of feel this is just an early kind of spoiler, I guess, to it, that especially if we do our normal end of year review, that I'm going to say AJ Styles is probably going to be in I would say my top 3 this year. Where he gets placed, I don't know, but I think performance wise, he's had to have a lot of different kind of opponents, including the Roman Reigns affair, which by the way wasn't that bad when he actually had matches with him, and Jericho, and of course he started back in the Rumble, the big debut that he had, and I kind of feel like he's kind of maybe one of their best. I mean, he's a bit like John Cena was for me the year before, very consistent. in the matches. Matt, just briefly, Dean Ambrose. I know you mentioned him, but where does Dean Ambrose go in general? Because after this sort of feud with